morning, everyone, and welcome to Sunday worship on August 2nd. It is a joy to be kicking off our Sundays of mission reflection throughout this month of August, where I will be joined by guests from our church and beyond as we reflect on how Christ is calling us to live out his ministries in these times, as we strive to feed the hungry and help those who are suffering, the ways that we creatively continue to reach out and support all of our partner organizations through this ongoing pandemic. It is my joy to welcome today Deb and Brett. They are two former young adult volunteers. We will also be welcoming in a little bit Tacoma, who will be joining to share the children's sermon. But let us begin with our scripture readings for today. Our first reading is from Isaiah 55, verses 1 through 5, to be read by Deb.
If you are thirsty, come and drink water. If you do not have any money, come, eat what you want. Drink wine and milk without paying a cent. Why waste your money on what really isn't food? Why work hard for something that doesn't satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and you will enjoy the very best foods. Pay close attention. Come to me and live. I will promise you the eternal love and loyalty that I promised David. I made him the leader and ruler of the nations. He was my witness to them. You will call out to nations you have never known, and they will have never known you, but they will come running because I am the Lord, the Holy God of Israel, and I have honored you.
Our second scripture reading is from Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 through 21, and it will be read by Brett.
Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children.
This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
This program is a great option for anyone between the ages of 19 and 30 that wants to learn more about who they are, who God is, and what it means to serve God in this world.
I found so much strength that I didn't know I had during my YAV year.
My time here has been the most amazing time of my life. I've been challenged a lot, and that can be difficult, but also I can see the growth that I'm going through, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And I wanted to do something where I could actively be involved and actively be working for something else besides myself. And I feel like once you're doing that, your purpose will come to you.
You can see God working in your life, and also you can see God through these people.
Jump right in. Don't be afraid to be a part of a new experience. The slogan is a lifetime of change, and it's true. It transforms your perspective of the world.
Es una bonita experiencia y entonces poco a poco es eso, ¿no? Claro, sí, es como mis hijos, ¿no? Mis hijas, sí. Entonces yo creo que es bueno eso, ¿no?
and it's not a place of you have to be in this stage of your life for the YAV program to be beneficial and an amazing step for you to do, but it can meet you where you are, and it can take you somewhere you never thought you would be able to go.
So hello everyone, and welcome to this scripture conversation for children on this Sunday, August 2nd. It is my joy to welcome another young adult volunteer alum, Tacoma, who is joining myself and by extension, Brett and Deb, to share about the YAV program, but also help us discover how Christ is calling us through this story. So our story for today is about Jesus feeding the 5,000 plus people. So there are 5,000 plus men, women, and children that he gathered together on a hillside, and taking 5 loaves and 2 fish, he broke, blessed, and shared with them, and there was a feast. So, but at the very beginning of this story, Matthew tells us that Jesus had compassion for the crowds. He took the time to care for them, to spend time with them. He took time to heal them in the midst of all of their different needs and hurts. And so I wanted to reflect with Tacoma and invite her to help share with us how we as Christians begin to follow Christ in his compassion, how Christ calls us to have compassion for each other, and particular for the ways that Tacoma learned about what compassion means during her YAV year. So Tacoma, I'll pass it over to you.
Hello. So one thing I learned in my YAV year that was very important that I wish I had known day one of my YAV year is sometimes showing up is enough. Showing up to just talk to the person who, I worked at a homeless day center, who is just walking in from the street after a long night, just talking to them and just asking them, hey, how you doing? Or, hey, did you hear that boom last night? I don't know what that was about. Just talking to them and really just meeting them where they are and not expecting anything else. That was, if I had known that day one, probably my first 3 months would have been a whole lot easier. But that can also apply. I worked at a church and I worked with children, and just asking them, hey, how was school this week? Or, hey, you told me you had a test on Wednesday. Did that go well? And just being there and being present was one of the biggest things that I learned in the beginning. And it really helped me learn so much more and carry through and make my YAV year really what I wanted it to be.
So compassion is showing up. That is pretty, yeah, that is central to Christ's call and central to his ministry. And showing up is hard to do today, but I think we can, again, celebrate in the ways that technology helps us to show up. Again, Tacoma is calling in from the Midwest, and we are here in Delaware. And the gift of technology is that we get to show up in slightly different ways. And so again, I'm excited to see how the YAV program shifts and adapts over this upcoming year, but particularly kind of, again, as we all explore what it looks like to show up during this time. I think we're still discovering how our compassion is still driving us to be present with each other. So thank you so much for sharing, Tacoma, and blessings on your continued ministry, again, as you continue on past your YAV year.
Thank you.
So again, it is a joy to be gathering today with these former young adult volunteers. It was my joy to have gotten to know Deb, Brett, and Tacoma through my service as the PCUSA campus minister in St. Louis, serving UKirk St. Louis. But after they graduated from college, each of these folks headed off to serve as a young adult volunteer. The YAV program, YAV, is a program through the Presbyterian Church USA for young adults between the ages of 22 and 30 to go and do a year of service. Newcastle Presbyterian Church supports this ministry through our Pentecost offering, which goes to support broader youth and young adult ministries of the PCUSA. So let us begin. Deb and Brett, what do we need to know about the YAV program?
Well, so the YAV program has both international and national sites, from DC to Scotland, all over the place, really working on core tenets and different things along those likes. Deb, Tacoma, and I, we all served in Washington, D.C. together, which was kind of special that we all got to do that year together. Yeah.
So each of the sites very much rely on mission partners in those areas. What were the different organizations, nonprofits, or churches that y'all served with? Deb, get us started. Where did you serve?
So I worked at, so I had 2 placements actually that I split my time at. I spent some of my time at Northminster Presbyterian Church, which is a church in, well, it's in Northwest DC, but it's very far north. It's almost in Maryland. And it's a church that wanted to get more involved in mission work in their community. So my job was to establish mission programs there and really to serve the community any way that they needed. And then my second placement was with our Presbyterian Office of Public Witness on Capitol Hill, which is the PCUSA. In case you didn't know, the PCUSA has an advocacy branch on Capitol Hill. We have a couple full-time staff members there who speak to Congress about issues about how faith and politics intersect. And when there are issues that the church has a stance about, they advocate to Congress to support things like more humane policies.
Wonderful. And Brett, did you have 2 sites or were you at one location?
I was at one location. My organization is Everyone Home DC. They changed their name halfway through my year, so they were formerly Capitol Hill Group Ministry. That organization works with the homeless population in DC from prevention all the way to addressing different areas that affect our homeless neighbors. So my title was Community Engagement Specialist, which felt really weird to have specialist at the end of your job title, but it was really an awesome opportunity. I was the volunteer coordinator there, as well as I got to participate in a lot of local policy changes in DC, which was really cool to do that at the local level, with DC being kind of having a council and a mayor that governs its entire body. But it was, I loved it. I am still in contact with Everyone Home DC and a lot of the staff and really appreciate it.
So in our gospel reading for today, the story begins with Jesus getting out of the boat and noticing the crowd and seeing the needs among them and having compassion for them. As you think about your experience during your YAV year, how did your YAV year shape your understanding of our Christ-like compassion, the ways that we are called to follow Christ in service? What were the ways that you experienced that during the year, but also that you're continuing to experience it now? And I should say this marks almost the 1-year anniversary of the completion of your YAV year. So as you look back on the past year, how have you continued to live out this call? So Deb, you want to kick it off again? Get us started.
Sure. I think that I learned a lot during my year, but I think the biggest thing that I learned was patience, which I think is an important element of compassion. I think getting impatient with people is not compassionate, and something that I had to learn a lot during the year. We had first of all, one important element of the YAV program is that you live in intentional community. So we lived in a house. That means that your home is supposed to be like a community. You share things, you do a lot of activities together, even though you're not, even though you're working at different places, you're still considered one unit. And there's a lot of difficulties in that. I think that most people who end up leaving the program actually leave it not because of their placement, but because of the intentional community in which they live. And I would say that that's probably the hardest element of it, and where I had to learn the most Christ-like compassion is in learning to live with, because everyone comes into it with different experiences is the big thing. Everyone is coming from a different place. We all have very different lives coming in. And then you're put in this house where you're supposed to live very closely in cooperation and in community with one another. And I think that I've taken that with me, and it's really given me a lot more understanding. Now, right now this summer, I'm doing a lot of work with immigrants and refugees, and like we had a language barrier, language issues in our house, and that's given me a lot more experience working with people who are not native English speakers, and for whom language and communication needs to be very clear and consistent. And that's really one area, one of many areas I'm taking it. I just don't want to ramble on about all the different little things.
And where are you in life right now?
Oh, yes, that's important. So I am a law student at the University of Michigan now, and I have spent my summer working with the Michigan Human Trafficking Clinic. So I'm working with victims of human trafficking, working with them in a variety of legal needs, but a number of those, we work with domestic clients, but the majority of our clients are international, which is how the language thing comes in.
Yes. And Brett, what about yourself? As you think about Christ's compassion and that call for Christians to emulate that throughout their lives, how did you experience that during your YAV year, and how are you continuing to live that out?
Yeah. So I think I'd echo a little bit of what Deb said, but also I think grace was a big part of the year, and giving that to house members and the people I worked with at my organization, and just like all my neighbors, and being patient. But another really big thing was that I learned, and hopefully like I'm trying to like continue to do this, is to uplift the voices that are often not heard, and to take a step back and to not take up space in rooms, is something that I think I really took away from YAV, and to use my privilege to do that for others.
And where are you now?
So I'm a seminary student at Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond, Virginia.
Yes. So as y'all continue to think about, again, the impacts of your YAV here, ponder with me for a moment. So in this story, it's the Jesus' miracle story that appears in all four Gospels, of the feeding of the 5,000. So as we think about the miracle of this moment, of where the disciples came up to Jesus and said, there's not enough, we have to send the people home. And Jesus says, hold on just a moment. And with 5 loaves and 2 fish totally transforms the gathering into a feast. As you think about your YAV year, were there any moments of awe or wonder, or just being amazed by God's abundance? Were there any just seemingly impossible situations where in the midst of it all, the Holy Spirit moved and new possibilities arose? Any stories come to mind?
I think of celebrating the funding that we received as a coalition. So my organization was a part of the Way Home Coalition that works to end chronic homelessness in DC, and I got to see a full budget year, and to know that there was a lot of frustration and disappointment and people just being angry, and to know that we got some of the wins and that people would still be cared for and that we'd still have outreach workers was a really big win. And to get to see that was really amazing. And within that, I got to see several pastors really step up and go to council meetings and use their voice and talk to their constituents who were on the council. And I think that was an amazing experience. But also like simple things like conversations on the bus with a stranger, I really take those, like I hold those really dear to my heart.
And Deb, what about your experiences?
So I think I'm thinking more about within our house. I think, as we implied, we didn't always have the least contentious house, but I remember some really, at the same time, when I think back on the YAV year, like I thought my best moments would be like winning a victory on Capitol Hill or having like a big meeting that went really well. I mean, we didn't win any big victories on Capitol Hill, but besides that,
you had some good meetings though over the course of your year, right?
Yes, we had some good meetings, but no, when I think back on my YAV year, like what my favorite parts were, I really think about like the little things, like Brett said. I mean, and I really actually think about our house. And like, for example, I'm drinking coffee from this mug right now, which Brett definitely recognizes. We spent a day, a Saturday that we didn't have to do it, that we had off or something, and we went down to like Old Town, Alexandria, and we just like explored the waterfront and went to like, there are these little artisan shops down there, and several of us got coffee mugs that they're all unique, but they all look kind of like this. And I just think back on that day with so much fondness, because of the people and the day, and it really shines out as a bright light. And there are a million other little moments like that within the house.
But those ordinary moments of community, of sacred community in many ways, of being able to love and enjoy each other's company, which I think we're all missing in these times of the pandemic.
Yes.
But yeah, so speaking of the pandemic, so the Young Adult Volunteer Program annually places young adults from August to July. So how has this pandemic been shifting the YAV program? As recent alums, what have y'all heard in these times of how is our national office adjusting to these circumstances? Yeah, Brett, take it away. I believe you have the latest.
Yeah. So towards the end of this last YAV class, several of our international sites really had to work to get folks back home to the US, which I think was really interesting to see those stories and how they navigated all that. But for this coming year, they're switching the dates of when they're going, like what the year will look like. So they're currently seeking YAVs, or about to go from January 2021 to August 2021. And it looks like they're doing sites both nationally and internationally. I think that's probably to be determined if anything will change with that. But it's been really interesting to see how the YAV program has navigated the pandemic. If any of you guys are on Instagram, you can follow the YAV program, and a lot of the sites do takeovers. And a lot of the national sites, they have house members that are still like living in community and some that are living back home and still really working to hold on to that space, which I think is really special.
Yes, I know that, similar as each site's focus is different, I'm sure the pandemic has had a different impact. Do y'all know what the current, for this past year, I know there are usually at least over a dozen national sites and usually a half dozen international. Is that about the number that y'all remember for this year?
I think this year was a little bit less as they're navigating getting rid of some of the door replacements.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so each of the sites, especially nationally, has a slightly different focus from everything from, again, broader poverty, broader homelessness, broader immigrant justice issues, as well as food insecurity, striving to seek kind of broader social and collective change, particularly in urban areas, but there are also some rural sites as well. So as y'all kind of, as our closing question, the slogan of the Young Adult Volunteer Program is a year of service for a lifetime of change. As we think about the slogan, as we think about Christ's model of the feeding of the 5,000 plus, how do these two themes or these two ideas intersect, especially for the broader church? As we think about our support of the Young Adult Volunteer Program, and again, our Christ call to ministry, what is the takeaway for the broader church today, would you say? Deb, you want to begin?
Sure. So I'm just thinking about how I think the year of service for a lifetime of change, the lifetime of change element, I think something that you know a little coming in, but you really recognize during the year is not about the people you're serving. It is about possibly the impact of the program taken as a whole, but really it's more about the change that it does to the people who participate in it. And like we said, learning things like Christ-like compassion, really assessing what you want to be doing in life, things like that. And I'm just thinking about the feeding of the 5,000 was, they were following Jesus to learn. And the feeding and the nourishment was so that they could continue learning and not go home. Mm-hmm. And I just really think that I apologize, my cat is biting me for my attention.
But that's a really interesting point, that so much of our focus of the story is on the feeding itself, but yet the ultimate goal was that continuation of community, that continuation of folks being able to follow Christ, and witness his teachings, his miracles. Again, his ministry firsthand. That's lovely. Brett, do you have any thoughts?
I think being basically a year out now from YAV and realizing that it's you who change and get to unpack all these things that you have learned and people that have impacted you and community that you build. I'm forever grateful, and I think it's just amazing how continual it is, and it kind of makes me think a little bit towards the end of the story that there's still baskets left over, and that there are things that will continue on after YAV and all that jazz. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today to share about your experience of the Young Adult Volunteer Program, as well as just about this, the ministry of this broader program, both, again, providing transformation both for young adults, but for the broader world, for the broader church. So blessings on each of your all's continued journey through seminary, through law school, and blessings as you continue to discern your call for how Christ is calling you to discipleship each and every year of your life. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks.